kids running amok at an airport, a legendary wartime truce, and the true story behind Scrooge. These Christmas movies are extra special to watch during the holiday season since they're all based on real events. The 2015 NBC TV movie Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors earned critical praise for its heartfelt narrative, which was drawn from stories about Parton's own childhood in eastern Tennessee. A sequel, Dolly Parton's Christmas of Many Colors, Circle of Love, followed in 2016. That film, about her family facing various challenges at the holidays, netted an Emmy Award nomination for Outstanding Television Movie in 2017. In an interview with the Country Daily, Parton said that Christmas of Many Colors was drawn from various true stories taken from her life. Its central story about Parton's father and siblings pooling their meager resources to buy their mother a wedding ring helped to provide the film's title.
She had a house full of kids, never had a wedding ring, so that kind of represents the circle of family and love.
As executive producer of the movie, Parton was on set for much of the production and found that some scenes drawn from her life were hard to watch. One in particular, which depicted her family facing the possibility of freezing to death after being snowed in, was a particularly emotional experience for her. She said, "When we got to the part when Mama was praying and the tears were frozen on our little faces, when I was watching that, I just couldn't hardly bear it." The 2021 comedy 8-Bit Christmas is a warm-hearted tribute to not only the highs and lows of the holiday season, but also the mania generated by 1980s-era toys and video games, particularly the console that dominated the latter half of the decade. In an interview for the Gamer Looks at 40 podcast, writer Kevin Jakubowski noted that his own childhood experiences inspired a great deal of the story. He explained, "The story came from wanting a Nintendo and all my friends really wanting it in 87, 88. Many other aspects of the story, including the town in which it takes place, were also assembled from Jakubowski's childhood." Jakubowski said, "Everything in the book is heightened and exaggerated. All of those things are inspired by real life and my childhood." Despite having Bridesmaids director Paul Feig behind the camera and a host of comedy pros in supporting roles, the comedy Unaccompanied Minors flopped during its brief December 2006 theatrical run. The film follows a gaggle of kids who run roughshod through a Midwestern airport when their Christmas Eve flights are grounded. However, the closest the script comes to delivering on its premise is a string of unfortunately underfed sight gags. Unaccompanied Minors was loosely based on writer Susan Burton's "In the Event of an Emergency, Put Your Sister in the Upright Position," a segment from a 2001 episode of the NPR magazine show This American Life. Unlike Unaccompanied Minors, Burton's piece is serious and frequently melancholy as she recalls a childhood spent on flights, shuttling between her divorced parents along with her younger sister. One such trip ends abruptly when Chicago's O'Hare Airport is snowed in, forcing Burton and other unaccompanied children into a sort of holding pen until the airlines could contact parents. The story is thoughtful and emotional in a way that the film can't begin to touch, unfortunately. 2017's The Man Who Invented Christmas explores the events of 19th century author Charles Dickens' life that inspired him to write his enduring holiday novella, A Christmas Carol. The film takes creative liberties in depicting the inspiration for the story. As NPR reviewer Mark Jenkins noted, Dickens, played by Dan Stevens, appears surrounded by the characters in his own story like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. However, The Man Who Invented Christmas also accurately depicts many of the biographical details of Dickens' life. His father, played in the film by Sir Jonathan Pryce, did go to debtor's prison when Dickens was 12 years old, and Dickens' career was in a tailspin prior to the publication of A Christmas Carol in 1843. Individuals from Dickens' own life also inspired some of the characters in his works, though the characters played by Christopher Plummer is just one of several suggested figures that inspired his creation of Ebenezer Scrooge. Additionally, Dickens actually self-published A Christmas Carol after falling out with his publishers. It was a costly move that ended up netting him a far smaller share of the profits than he would have otherwise gotten. CBS aired the made-for-TV feature The Man Who Saved Christmas in 2002, which gave Jason Alexander, still just a few years off Seinfeld, a rare shot at leading man status. Alexander played entrepreneur A.C. Gilbert, who created the Erector set in 1913. The film follows Gilbert's efforts to fight against the government's decision to encourage people to buy war bonds instead of Christmas gifts. Due to his successful lobbying, the press of the day dubbed Gilbert the Man Who Saved Christmas, thanks to his defense of gift-giving. Alexander pours on the charm as Gilbert and is very effective in a largely dramatic role, and the film does make note of many of Gilbert's accomplishments outside of toy making. For instance, he was among the first business owners to provide benefits such as medical insurance and Christmas bonuses to his employees. Though it's been remade twice, the original 1974 version of Black Christmas remains a high point in the history of the slasher film. The Canadian production was in part inspired by an enduring urban legend known as the babysitter and the man upstairs. The grisly story, in which a sitter receives terrifying phone calls, inspired several other horror films and was itself reportedly based on a real-life unsolved murder case from way back in 1950. However, the film's gruesome murder spree, carried out by an unseen assailant against the members of a college sorority, may have been influenced by several other real-life crimes. In an interview on the 2008 Blu-ray release of the film, screenwriter Roy Moore has alluded to a string of gruesome murders committed in Montreal and Calgary during the late 1960s by serial killer Wayne Clifford Bowden as a possible inspiration. Meanwhile, co-star Nick Mancuso told The Telegraph that the story drew upon a 1943 murder case in Montreal's Westmount neighborhood. Not all holiday movies are merry and bright. Case in point, 2017's Christmas Princess, which ventures down a few dark paths while telling the story of teenager Donnelly Marquez. In the film, Donnelly endures abuse at the hands of her drug-addicted mother and is subsequently moved through various foster homes. Thankfully, the film has a silver lining. Donnelly achieves her long-standing dream of becoming a princess in Pasadena, California's famous Tournament of Roses parade. The highs and lows of Donnelly's story are made even more moving by the fact that they are also true. As a 2015 story in the Los Angeles Times illustrated, she and her siblings were neglected by their birth mother, who eventually surrendered them at a police station. The trio was shuttled through various group homes before being adopted by Sarah and Ignacio Marquez. With her family situation now stabilized, Donnelly launched her campaign for the tournament's royal court, and as the Los Angeles Times article noted, Donnelly also took her story to Los Angeles group homes to show other young people that they could escape the cycle of neglect. She told the outlet, "It doesn't matter where you come from, you can do anything as long as you set your mind to it." What happens when an ambitious congressional assistant tasked with closing a U.S. Air Force base in Guam meets the handsome, nice guy captain in charge? Sparks fly, of course, as the 2020 Netflix rom-com Operation Christmas Drop details. But viewers also get a bit of history in addition to the heart-melting moments. The humanitarian missions carried out by the captain and his crew are not only real, but a long-standing holiday tradition in the Pacific region. Since 1952, real-life Air Force crews stationed on Guam have been airdropping food and other supplies to some of the 2,000 islands that make up the tiny Pacific Ocean region of Micronesia. The 400-pound boxes of essential items are dropped by parachute to the island's inhabitants, who often depend on the Christmas Drop donations for food, medicine, and other necessities. And while Operation Christmas Drop depicts a scenario in which the government plans to cancel the supply deliveries, the real Christmas Drop remains active today. An extraordinary gift brings a chance at new love in 2018's Once Upon a Christmas Miracle. Amy Teagarden stars as a young woman whose desperate need for a liver transplant is answered by a complete stranger. His selfless act leads to a tentative connection that eventually blossoms into romance and marriage. Though the plot of Christmas Miracle sounds like the stuff of Hollywood rom-com fantasies, it's actually based on a real-life couple, Heather Kruger and Chris Dempsey. Kruger had autoimmune hepatitis, which by 2015 had so compromised her health that doctors advised her to seek out a liver donor. By chance, Dempsey overheard Kruger's cousin talking about her condition and decided to become her donor. The operation was a success, but even more remarkable was the bond that grew between the couple.
I just thought that this would be somebody I would want to get to know.
Within months, they got engaged and eventually married. In addition to lending their real-life fairy tale to the Hallmark production, Kruger and Dempsey also appear briefly in the film as a couple dancing at a fundraising event to pay for medical expenses. The miracle mentioned in the title of 1977's Christmas Miracle in Caufield, U.S.A. refers to the rescue of minors trapped by a cave-in on Christmas Eve in 1951. However, that storyline actually only makes up a portion of the NBC made-for-TV movie. Small-town drama takes up much of the runtime, especially the miserly actions of the mine owner and his impact on a family that works for him, including son Kurt Russell and daughter Melissa Gilbert. Their scenes are well acted, but don't grip the viewer in the same manner as the cave-in. The accident itself appears to be based on a mine accident that took place in West Frankfort, Illinois on December 21, 1951. An underground explosion of methane gas tore through the mine shortly before it was scheduled to close for the Christmas holiday, killing 119 mine workers. The disaster prompted the intervention of the federal government, which passed the Coal Mine Safety Act in 1952. The 2005 Oscar-nominated feature Joyeux Noel depicts a remarkable moment during World War I, when soldiers on opposing sides set aside their weapons to celebrate Christmas together. The informal Christmas truce of 1914 reportedly involved approximately 100,000 troops on the Western Front near Belgium on December 24th. German soldiers began singing Christmas carols and invited their British and French counterparts to join them to celebrate the holiday. The troops exchanged gifts of tobacco and alcohol and even played soccer during the brief truce. The Christmas truce of 1914 was reportedly the last widespread pause in fighting during what was then known as the Great War, though there were attempts. The sheer amount of casualties on both sides made it harder to put aside grievances for a night, even on Christmas.